So good morning to everybody. It is a pleasure to me to announce the visit of Paolo Molaro and many other colleagues for the espresso meeting that we will have today and tomorrow. And Paolo has offered to give this very interesting talk to all of us. The talk is on the telescopes and the paintings of a very famous Dutch astronomer. Paolo?
Painter.
Painter, sorry. Painter, sorry, that's painter.
We will do afterwards. We will
yes.
promote him as an astronomer.
Paolo will clarify this later on. Yes, thank you. Paolo is very well known here at the IC because he's an old friend of us. He visited the IC for the first time in 1994, as you told me, or something like that. And since then, he has visited the IC many times, and he has collaborated with various researchers here at the IC. So thank you very much, Paolo. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say that Paolo was a former director of the Trieste Observatory. This is actually his current affiliation. So thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you, Maria Rosa, for this kind presentation. It's really a pleasure for me to be here finally after so long and give this talk. Well, the talk of today will be not really scientific talk. It's something between art and history. And is something, a study that we carry on with my colleague, Pierluigi Cervelli, which actually drew my attention and my interest in the year Jan Brueghel. Well, someone called Brueghel, someone called Brueghel. Since we are in Spain here, I will call him Brueghel, right? Because I hear that that's his precise way of pronouncing it here. Well, we took telescopes, but actually I have to say that perhaps telescope is not the right word, because at the very beginning, the name telescope has been given to the telescope only in the 1611 in a famous party of a Lincei party in 14 April 11 by Giovanni de Misiani with Celi. It was organized a party by Celi, which is the founder of the Lincei Academy in Italy. Okay, let's go. So just, it doesn't work. Back. Okay. Well, I have to say, just to introduce the topic, after 4 centuries, we don't know actually who is the real inventor of a telescope. We don't know who look at the star, use it to look at the stars for the first time. And we have really no one of the telescopes that were made in those years survived. And we don't have even a description of the first telescopes. So it's good to go to the art as a supply to have some documentation about this very early evolution of the telescopes. Sometimes you have also funny pictures like this one, which is a wall painting in Museo degli Argenti, Loggia del Mezzanino in Firenze. But it's nice, you know, that's this one. And, sorry, okay. It does not respond properly. May I switch on with the hand? Okay. We go to the heart, a description. It's okay. I will, a good coverage of a topic of a heart, and first illustration is done by Bedini in 1971 in a paper, The Tube of Long Vision, and I will refer to this paper if you want a broad coverage, but I will give only, we talk about only Jan Brueghel. Just to, no, again, it's all inverted here. Okay, let's go first to look who actually, what we know about the invention of the telescope. This is just a very quick introduction to the topic. To fix historically the scene, we are at the beginning of the 17th century, and the Netherlands were split in two. There was the lower Netherlands, including Belgium and the lower Netherlands, that was belonging to Spain. And actually, the Upper Netherlands was a collection of independent states, the 7 states that collected under a unified command, the state generals. And of course, the Northern Netherlands were Protestants, while the others were Catholics. And they were very struggling. Here you have this border between the two actually changed several times in these years, because they were the famous long 80 years were started in 1568 and lasting in 1648. And we are here in the 1608, and we are just before a ceasefire, which lasted for 12 years, and which was quite important for the spread out of the telescope around Europe, as we will see. So now you have to push left. Okay, good. Just to give us, despite the word, the painting, the art in this area was flourishing. They had really a renaissance, and this is a very nice painting of the epoch of 1614, which show the fishing of souls, the rivalry between Catholics and Protestants on the different sides of the river, fishing for souls, and here are depicted, these are the Catholics, and with the commander, Albert VII, and that's Albert VII and Isabella Clara Eugenia, which is the Infanta of Spain, and the daughter of Felipe II, which was the commanders of the Catholic part, and Maurice of Nassau of Orange was actually the commander of the 7 provinces in the north. No. Sorry. Okay, lenses of the telescope appeared in the year 8, but of course there was a long process of improving the lenses. Lenses were already started with this record of used lenses for the vision in the 14th and 15th century. And of course they were used just a single lens. The convex lens was used for presbyopia, and the concave lens were actually used only 15th century, a bit later, for correcting myopia. So the first documentation, the first presentation of a telescope for which we have record happened in the 25th of September of year 8. What happened there? Because there was in the turret of the Hague, there was a peace conference there for the 12 years peace, which actually happened, was signed a few months later in April of year 9. And from the tower at the Hague, a man presented the telescope. There is a lot of records of this event, either in the letters of the Embassy of Serum or in normal magazines. And what happened, there is a record documentation that from the turret of the Hague, they could see the windows of a church in Leiden, which is 18 kilometers away. Even the conversation between people in that exhibition is recorded in the popular magazine, pamphlet, the French Le Mercure. So no doubt there is independent source of information, of description of this event. And this event happened in front of all the delegations. The delegation discussing the ceasefire were between Spanish and the state generals. The French commission delegation were acting as intermediate to mediate, but were also the British delegation, the Siam delegation. So if you want to keep things secret, that was the worst thing to do, because the telescope and the power of the telescope was presented in front of a delegation of all Europe. And that is relevant for how the telescope spread out in Europe. And it's interesting that also in this report, in the magazine report, in December 2008, an anonymous journalist wrote, giving account of event, also mentioned the possibility of a telescope to be used to looking at stars. So that is rather remarkable thing. Okay, but after a few days, actually 1 week later, there is this document arrived in the Hague, and this is the request for the patent made by Hans Lipperhey, asking actually to be to have permanent financing from the state. And this document actually has been discovered only in the 19th century. And this is the first document, the early document that we have of that proves of the telescope. But the story is much more complicated than that. And I have to say, to mention here that Girolamo Sirtori, already in 1618, that was investigating the birth of the telescope, suggests that Lipperhey was actually the inventor of the telescope. And, but he said that Lipperhey learned the ability from the customer in his shop, lens shop. So he knew, he learned from a customer how to do it, and he did. However, a few days later, there is another document on the 17th of October, so about 2 weeks later, another request for patent was submitted. And this is by Jacob Matthews. Jacob Matthews was an instrument maker by Alkmaar, quite far away from here. And Jacob Matthews is brother of a professor of mathematics, and was son of the famous Matthews, a mathematician for which is already known for the Matthews ratio, which gives the pi value as a ratio between these two numbers. And his case was supported by the brother. His brother, it was professor mathematician, and also supported by Cartesius in his diopter. It's very likely he admitted that he knew the other requested patent, so probably he rushed and he in his submission. However, it's clear that if he didn't knew already how to make the telescope, it was not possible to submit a formal request in 2 weeks, considering that Alkmaar is quite away from the Hague. So if you consider also that the information 1 week and so, yeah, already he should have already knew how to make his telescope. And that's not the end of the story. There is a third man, Sacharias Janssen, which apparently there is a documentation that on the 14th of October, so a few days after Lipperhey presented his request, he showed up, a man showed up to the committee that was appointed to judge for the request of patent, and showing that he was able to make a telescope. So in the few days, 3 people, 3 persons, were able to show up how to be show up and how to that we were able to make a telescope. The case of Sacharias Janssen was actually taken by Pierre Borel. Pierre Borel in 1665 wrote a famous book, De Vero Inventore Telescopi. Pierre Borel was a doctor at the court of Roi Soleil, and made this book in the 65. And with the help of another Borel that was ambassador in Paris, actually he asked the Middelburg city to make an investigation. And the city of Middelburg made this investigation, and the son of Janssen came up and said that his father made his first telescope already in 1604 and copied from an Italian. There is also an independent source that traced back from Isaac Beckman, not Beckman, which was rector in the Latin University at Dordrecht in 1634, which in his diary, Isaac Beckman was taking lessons of how to make lenses. He wanted to build his telescope. And he was taking lessons from the son of Janssen. And during these lessons, the son of Janssen said to Beckman that he make the telescope his father made the telescope already at the beginning in 1604. So there are two independent sources of pointing to Janssen. However, a work by Cornelis de Waard in the beginning of the last century revealed that Janssen was really a bad guy. He was very brilliant, but at the same time he was not paying his debts, especially for drinking bills. He was assaults of fellow citizens, counterfeiting Spanish coins. It's strange that maybe the likely inventor of a telescope was a sort of borderline person. And certainly this fits with the fact that he is not the sort of person that could apply for a patent. He is a sort of person that will try to get most of the money out of his invention. And don't consider this he was very brilliant, and in fact is possible also the inventor of a microscope, much before Galileo. So he was a very talented guy. Okay. Of course, we don't know much of information. It is already strange that three people came out the same weeks claiming the invention of a telescope. And if you see that, in fact, two of those they were neighbors. The houses of Janssen and Lipperhey was just on the opposite side of a church in Middelburg. So it's clear that something was going on between the two that we don't, of course, we cannot reconstruct precisely. But, of course, they knew each other. Okay. And the story is even more complicated. There is another antefactor that, according to Simon Marius, that was a German astronomy and author of Mondo Iovalis in the 1614, he writes that he became aware of the existence of a telescope in a famous fair in Frankfurt. This was the most important event in all Europe in that period and for centuries. And in fact, in that fair, one of his friends, Fax, a Nobel friend, was approached by men trying to sell him the telescopes. And since the man was asking a lot of money, he was reluctant to give to him, and they didn't make the deal. And Fuchs asked Simon Marius the way he thought to be able to reply to make a replica out of it, and they failed actually. But this story is probably true. So in fact, there is a telescope. There is elements to believe that the telescope was for sale one month before, let's say, the famous October 08. Of course, we don't know who was this man in the Frankfurt Fair trying to sell. And it's possible that it was Sacharias Janssen, but we don't know. Maybe he's a fourth person. And, of course, then there are other possibilities, more complicated. And one possible pretender is Giovanni Battista della Porta, which wrote important books in optics. And Giovanni Battista della Porta, one year later, in August 2009, was asked an opinion about the telescope. I said, well, this is una coglioneria. They copied the telescope from my book. And in fact, if you go in his book of De Refrazione, you see something here which is a description of what is possible at telescope. It's not clear here. He said that if you put a concave and convex, you can see amplified. But the interpretation here is not clear. Someone believes that he was referring to just glasses, as another, and a telescope. In the other interpretation, for instance, there is Kepler. Kepler was believed that Giovanni Battista della Porta already invented the telescope, but he wanted to keep secret. Certainly, here is something more than a glass, in my opinion, because if you can put a concave and a convex lens, you cannot help the vision. These glasses are for presbyter myope, but because of my age, but at that period it's not so easy to help the vision in both ways, for myopia and presbyopia, just putting two glasses together. Okay, and then there is another possible, is Raffaello Gualterotti, which actually he wrote in the 1610, so when the telescope was already invented, a letter to Galileo, saying that he had invented the telescope a few years, and he showed actually to the Grand Duke Ferdinand in 1598 already. But he added that the thing was so feeble that he didn't give credit to this. And it's possible, because if you have only two magnification of the telescope, that would be, you don't call it really a telescope. It doesn't look like an instrument, a very powerful instrument to look as a new invention. Of course, then there is a possibility of Harriot. You know that Harriot observed the moon already in July 1609, and according other strange information, from Bedini, for instance, it appears that he used the telescope already in 1585. And there is, probably on the press, the Spanish press appeared September the last year, that there is also a claim that was a Catalan, a person from Catalonia, from Girona, and this case is supported by, is claimed by Pelling, actually working on a previous work. The source of this argument is referred to the book of Girolamo Sartori, which actually, after the discovery of the telescope, went around, traveled all around Europe to try to get the secrets of invention, and he came to Spain. And in Spain, actually, I have to say that Girolamo, the telescope was already invented, and actually Sartori had a telescope with him that bought in Milan in April 09, before Galileo. And he went around and actually found in Girona a person that was able to make a telescope. And this person is Juan Roget, etc. The point that where the case put forward is that he sent his telescope to the Frankfurt Fair, and so on, if the telescope reached the Flemish. It's possible, but the second part, there is no element. What is true is that, it's difficult to say, since we are already in the year 09, it's possible that actually this was an aged man, actually a spectacle maker, already made his own telescope. It's possible, but, the elements are not compelling, let's say. So then we know the story. Galileo actually get the news only towards July 09, so very late compared to the others, because he was a bit misled by Paolo Sarpi, his friend, which already in January said, well, I heard the news of a telescope is something not to bother very much. And only in June he had a second information and confirmation that the telescope was existing, because in that time there was several claims about the invention of a telescope, so were difficult to understand which ones were good and which ones were not good. And so in July, he made his own telescope in 24 hours, and when he applied himself, he made the first telescope of magnification free in 1 hour. Then he improved it, and in August, on the 24th of August of 09, he demonstrated the telescope with 9 power magnifications to the Doge in Venice. These are pictures showing this event. I say, yes, he got a permanent position here after this. And this, in a few months, he started observing the moon in November, and in January he discovered the moons of Jupiter, and in March these are the observations of the moon. That was very important because we are showing that the moon was another a planet like the Earth, with mountains. You can see from the light, you know very well. It traveled also the way how to compute the height of the mountains and so on. This is a drawing made by Galileo, which was actually very good with actual image of the moon. These are the famous discovery of the notebook by Galileo in 1610. It's January, actually. These are 2 days of January. And you see first he discovered 2, then 3, and suddenly 4 moons here. Okay, these are rather remarkable. And this is how he looked at Saturn. These are not the disk, but he thought it was 3 moons. And the phases of Venus, this was quite later on, however. And also he observed the Pleiades, and he found new stars there. And I think that this, to my touch, is the most important discoveries in all the Nuncio Sidereus. And in fact, when he sent the Nuncio Sidereus to Kepler, he got an answer from Kepler in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, which formed the Dissertatio cum Nuncio Sidereo. And discussing about the number of stars and the concept of infinity. And this very book that Kepler introduced, the Olbert paradox, why the sky is dark at night if you have infinite stars. And Keplero was not believing in the infinite, he was believing in the finite universe. And so the number of stars were finite. And that is the start of observational cosmology, with things and problems we struggle even today, although in a different context. Okay, so let's come to the real subject of this talk, and let's go to art. And just to remind you, who was Jan Brueghel? He was born in Brussels and died in Antwerp by cholera. And he's also known as the Brueghel of the flowers, or the velvet Brueghel, because of his touch. That is, you see, because I see John Beckman here. But anyway, this is his portrait. And, okay, he was the son of a renowned painter, a Flemish painter, Peter de Brueghel the Elder. You see that it's spelled in a different way, but is actually his father. Brueghel added the age here in 1604 just to be distinguished by his father. But actually, he was the son, and his brother was painter as well, was Peter Brueghel the younger, and he was also father of another painter, Jan Brueghel the younger. So it's a long family, a long tradition. He was born when his father, his father died. He was only a few years old. So actually, he didn't learn from his father. He learned actually from his grandmother, which was a painter miniaturist as well. And that was quite important for the proper characteristic of his art. The important thing for us is that in 1606, he became court painter at the court of Albert VII and Isabella, the so-called the archdukes in Brussels. And these are other paintings by Albert VII and Isabella in different ways. They were really very interested in art, in promoting arts. And so you have here several portraits. Here is their castle in Brussels, and here is the Marymount Castle, the Esther property. And you see here they are visiting, maybe you don't see that, they are visiting a gallery in Antwerp. So they were very, supportive of science and painting in general. During this period, Jan Brueghel depicted 4 paintings where the telescope is in. In this case, is unique. You cannot find other paintings which depicted the telescope. And the reason is because of the interest of Albert VII. It's not his own interest directly. It's just because he was painting what the things that they liked the Archduke. And these are the list of the painters, and we are going through this list right now. Probably the most famous is this painting. It's the allegory of the sight and smell. Well, this has a strange story, this painting. It belongs to a couple that the city of Antwerp commissioned it to Jan Brueghel around 1615 to celebrate a visit of the Archduke to the town. Then the original was made was a collective effort of 12 most famous painters in Antwerp, including Peter Paul Rubens. And the painting were given to the archidukes, but the original paintings were being destroyed. Was burned with the burn of the castle in Canterbury in 1731. So these that are at Prado right now actually are the copies made by Jan Brueghel himself, and only himself, not all the other paintings that probably were contributing to this painting in the paintings. And, well, we know that this is an exact copy of the original because rather recently, in 1990, there have been found other copies by minor paintings made in the 1660s. So when this painting was already came to Madrid. Okay? So we know that this is a copy of the original made by Jan Brueghel. A second paintings, okay, you have noticed the telescope, but we will come back later. A second series of paintings made in the same years are the allegory of the five senses, which are all at the Prado in Madrid. And here you have the smell, the hearing, the taste, and the touch. And for instance, here you have the hearing again. You can see, I don't know if you can appreciate the amount of details which are in these paintings. And actually many of these things, instruments, music, and so on, exist in nature. So we know that the painting reproduces the reality of the objects. It's not just a product of imagination of a painter or an artistic interpretation of reality. They are just like pictures, okay? That is very important for us. And we come now to this painting, which is a famous allegory of the sight. And you see that there is a telescope here, there is an armillary sphere there, and there are a lot of instruments, scientific instruments here to measure angular of the size, positions of the stars, and so on. And this is a hall inside the Gutenberg Palace, which is the one that burned in 1731, and showing with all the objects of the archidukes that are also reproduced there and there in the Equestrial. And this is a painting which is made in collaboration with Peter Paul Rubens. It is very short, I don't know if you know, they have a short relation, a special relation. They painted together something like 25 or 30 paintings. It's something very strange that's difficult to imagine in the nowadays, present days. They were two very famous artists working together. Peter Paul Rubens were doing the figures. All the rest were Jan Brueghel doing. Okay, so let's go to the first thing. And you see here that, oh, sorry, no, that was not important. I want to invert the order. You can here have a much more detail of the objects of instrumental scientific instruments. And we have here this magnificent telescope. Well, we know very well that this painting is dated. And we have a date here, it's written somewhere here. So it's 1617. There is no doubt that it's completed by that epoch. And you have here this magnificent telescope. This shows just a detail. It's made by 7 draw tubes and probably made by silver. And you see, with a very elegant support and so on, important terminals here of where are the lenses. Okay, the first thing that you can, if it is real, if it was depicted as it is, is really a very sophisticated instrument. You don't have you have no other illustration, design, or whatever of a telescope in those periods made such sophistication. This is another second painting that I was drawing. Is the one done 1718, and there is another similar instrument here of the same sort. Actually, you can compare very closely each other, and there are some differences between the two. Here you see that the color of the rings is different. One is done with 7 draw tubes. This is 8 draw tubes, and this, despite that all the other objects are precisely identical. So this leads to us to conclude that probably they are different instruments, although, of course, they are made probably by the same artisan, or by the same hand that make the two. But the interesting thing is that you don't have other illustration of that sort. This is a telescope depicted in 1624. This is 1614. With something later. The most close thing to the telescope depicted by Jan Brueghel is this reproduction of a telescope here in the... I need some water, sorry. May I have? I start with you first. Is in the book by Christoph Schneider, which published in the 1631, and is the one that studied the sunspots. And this is the closest resemblance that we could find in all the books of the period. Okay? But what's the interesting thing is that this telescope here is a Keplerian. Okay? A Keplerian telescope is something different from a Dutch or Galilean one. It is made by 2 convex lenses. Okay? While the Dutch one, or Galilean one, is 1 convex and 1 concave. So we start thinking, is possible that the telescope depicted in the Jan Brueghel is a Keplerian? Well, there are elements to think so. One is the length. If you compute the possible length of a telescope, it is short of 2 meters. And making a 2 meters Galilean or Dutch telescope is really not very convenient. It's difficult, that's because, the proper focal length add here. Is subtracted in a Galilean mounting, while it's added in a Keplerian one. So, in fact, it's much easier to make long telescopes in the Keplerian mounting. But it's important also that the field of view becomes smaller and smaller in the Dutch mounting. And if you have a Dutch mounting with 2 meters, you have just 5 minutes arc minutes of field of view, which makes very impractical or difficult to use. Second element, look at the houses of the lenses. You see here are the oculars of the 2 telescopes in the paintings. When you do a Galilean mounting, a Galilean telescope, the ocular is you have a length, you have direct to the length. And this is because you can put the eye wherever you like. It is not important. On the other hand, when you go to a Keplerian telescope, the ocular is made by a convex lens, so you have to put your eye precisely in a precise position. And so the oculars in a Keplerian telescope are made such a way to help your eye to put the eye in the proper position. And here you compare the sorry. Oh my God. I lost it. Okay, here we are. So you see that you have, this is actually the Galileo telescope. Here, you see, this is how the ocular is made. There is nothing. You put just the eye there. This is a Keplerian telescope. Actually, it's the oldest existing Keplerian telescope. It's conserved at the Adler Museum in Chicago. And you see here a classical ocular of a Keplerian telescope. And you see here the design and then how the ocular and where you put your eye. So the ocular in the painting actually really suggests is a convex lens and not a concave. And there is another evidence that all the development of a Keplerian telescopes is connected to the Ashburn family. Well, you can ask, probably most astronomers don't know, but there is a mystery in the mystery. We don't know who made the first Dutch telescopes. We don't know who made the first Keplerian telescope. Keplerian telescopes have been described in the dioptrice of Kepler, or less is what everyone thinks. He actually is published in the 1611, but he didn't make it. And the reason generally believed that Kepler didn't make his telescope because he was a theoretician and was not a practical. I don't believe to that explanation, frankly, because it was such an easy game to find convex lenses around. In fact, the explanation is that a Keplerian telescope is very much difficult to do because you have to need very high-quality lenses. And that's probably not all the story, because if you go and read the dioptrice, I did in Latin, I couldn't find an English version of the dioptrice, unfortunately, but if you go there, you don't see, you see that you discuss this in the problem 86, and actually he described how to look through two lenses, two convex lenses. And he describes also the case of three lenses, convex lenses, to make the vision erected. But in fact, there is no one word in Kepler where he described the telescope and the fact that you need the two lenses of different focal ratios to make the telescope, the amplification of a telescope. So it's even possible, but that Kepler didn't actually describe a telescope. So we don't know who actually did the first Keplerian telescope. There is one possibility, and certainly Christopher Schneider in 1631 was the first to write down about a Keplerian telescope. And it's possible, and it's certainly that he used the Keplerian telescope to study the sunspots, just to imagine the solar light on a piece of paper. However, when he started to do that, it's not clear at all. And he didn't before 1615, because there is a manuscript by Christopher Schneider which described how to make telescopes. And in fact, for his projection, he used a Dutch telescope, a Galilean one, which projects the images. Most astronomers don't know that, but he projects the images as well. And he used a Dutch telescope. And, well, there are some records that actually, in his book of the 31, he wrote that he manufactured a Keplerian telescope for the Archduke Maximilian. Archduke Maximilian III was the Archduke of Austria and was the brother of Albert VII. So was in tight contact with our Albert VII. And Christopher Schneider manufactured it. Actually, it happened that Maximilian had a Keplerian telescope, and he found a way to rectify the image because the imperator didn't like to watch his emperor upside down. And he used the solution of adding a third lens that was described by Kepler. But the thing is that we don't know when Christopher Schneider started to use a Keplerian telescope for his study of sunspots. And there is another independent source that actually brings to Francesco Fontana, who was an Italian in Naples, that he wrote a book in the 46, Nove Celestium, where he claimed that he invented the Keplerian telescope already in 1608. But even before the other telescope, but provide evidence only that the father, Giovanni Battista Zuppo, observed with a telescope made by Francesco Fontana, a Keplerian one, made by 2 convex lenses. But unfortunately, this is a very vague indication. And the only thing is that actually he published observations made with astronomical, what we know what we nowadays call an astronomical telescopes, in this book. And this is the moon observed with astronomical telescopes upside down, as you can see. And this is the first observation made, astronomical observation made with an astronomical telescope, means Keplerian telescope. And these are others of Saturn as well in the same book, and so on. There is another possibility of inventor of a Keplerian telescope that go against to Janssen. His son, in the famous answer to the city of Middelburg, said that he and his father not only invented the telescope, the Dutch telescope, that were very short, up to 1618. But in 1618, they invented the long vision telescope, which could be the astronomical telescope. However, 1618 is too late for us anyway, because the painting by Brueghel are 1617. So, is a puzzle, and I have no answer. We have no answer on that. The telescopes in the Brueghel painting are really a puzzle. So if you want to solve a puzzle, you go and you take the puzzle of this allegory of sight, which is made by 2,000 pieces, and you have the answer, but this was not delivered. Just to say that there is no, I have no explanation, and it is a mystery. Of these 2 telescopes in the Brueghel are really a mystery, a difficult of understanding if you look at track all the evolution of the telescopes that we have. There is a second mystery. I have still time, right? The most interesting, actually, thing. We were talking about only the most relevant instrument here. Look what is behind here. Behind Cupidus, you can see only if you make it zoom. There is another something that looks like a tube, glasses. The spyglass, okay, is sold by the monkey, okay? And this is, in our opinion, is a spyglass. As the length is about 15 inches, which is exactly what the size of the early telescopes. And is held by a monkey. The monkey in the tradition is the element of a foolishness. Okay? So certainly the painter had something in his mind when he depicted that. Actually, this other monkey here holds the glasses in his hands. Well, I have no interpretation. My interpretation is that the painter thought wanted to stress the fact that the telescope was invented by chance, and that's one possibility. The second is that the invention of a telescope introduced something strange in their belief, in their mind, but maybe both are wrong, I don't know. So the important thing is that this telescope was in the collection of important instruments of Archduke Albert VII. Why is there? Why is there? So we started to investigate that, and we came to this other painting. This is an extensive landscape with a view of the castle of Marymount. This painting is very unknown. Nobody wrote about this. It is preserved at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia. Okay? And you see here, the date of this painting is uncertain. And the date is just looking at this Vale Castle, Marymount, which was suffering several restorations in these years. So comparing other paintings, because there's been painting several times, with certain date, the experts came out with this range of date, 1608, 1610. This is another painting. I cannot show you, where it looks very different and just to compare the date. This is at Munich. Okay, you can zoom of this painting. What you see here, you see Albert VII looking through a spyglass, okay? And if you take a zoom again, okay, the length of this telescope in the original painting is only 3 centimeters. So, first of all, okay, this is no doubt there is a spyglass. And is a metallic shape with golden rings, and the lengths and diameters are the proper lengths of what we thought at that time. So this is the more ancient reproduction, depiction of a telescope whatsoever found that we have at our disposal. We argue that this telescope actually is the same it looks like the same of a second painter in 1617. And this could explain why it was so precious for the Albert VII. Okay, but the thing is that Albert VII had a spyglass already in these years, first year, second year. Okay, it's possible that this spyglass is connected to the inventor of a telescope, and you find some evidence. Daniele Antonini was a noble in the close entourage of Galileo in Padua. Actually, he's a nobleman from my town, Udine, and then went to serve the army of Albert VII. And in the he had a correspondence with Galileo because they were close friends. And in the 2nd September of 1611, wrote to Galileo, I have seen some of those spyglasses done by the first inventor and given to His Excellence Albert VII, but they are all cheap, so they are no magnification compared to the Galileo's ones. But the thing is important is that Albert VII, according to Daniele Antonini, had some spyglasses made by the inventor of a telescope. That is the fascinating thing. And if you go to another evidence recording, was from Maria de Reita, who was a famous astronomer, a father, which actually invented the way to rectify the image in the Keplerian telescopes, wrote in the 47 of this page, Marquis Spinola was visiting The Hague in September in order to negotiate the suspension of hostilities with the States. Having seen the new instrument, bought one for himself and presented it to the most serene Archduke Albert. So according to the Reita, Spinola was present when Lipperhey first presented his telescope, and in some way he managed to have a copy of it from the inventor, according to the Reita. And that Spinola was Italian, was a chief of a Spanish army. He was one of the most powerful men of the period. Look at many paintings by Rubens and Velázquez. Here is a famous painting of Velázquez. I mean, he has more painting, Spinola, than the archidukes as well. You can compare. He was the most powerful man in Europe of the period. And he managed to have a copy which gave to Albert VII, according to the Reita. This is that Spinola was clever. Immediately understood the importance of a telescope, and actually it was found the conversation which happened on the 25th of September 88 in The Hague. The magazine, popular magazine, the Mercure François, report all the conversation between Spinola and the Prince Henry, which is the brother of Albert VII. He said, from now on I could no longer be safe, for you will see me from afar. And Prince Henry replied, we shall forbid our men to shoot at you. And this is reported. Yes? So Spinola, the thing is relevant for us, is that Spinola understood the power of a telescope, absolutely wanted to have one copy for him. We know, there is a record, that also the chief of the French delegation tried to have a copy, but he failed. And he succeeded to have a copy only in December of the same year. So the French had a copy of the spyglass in December 08. So, again, according to Reita, one of the first instruments reached Albert VII. And according to Pierre Borel, however, the same investigation made by the Middelburg, etc., the same declaration by the son of Janssen, they say that his father invented the telescope and gave a copy, one to Prince Maurice and one to the Archduke Albert. So we have a different light of evidence here that one telescope made by Lipperhey probably went to Albert VII. The son of Janssen said that one of the telescopes done from his father went to Albert VII. So we cannot know who is one, who actually gave the telescope, but probably also both. We cannot exclude that both telescopes made by Janssen and Lipperhey reached Albert VII. So that's my conclusion. I mean, we have found, and this painting, I mean, the more ancient and the early depiction of a telescope, and that is possible. There are elements to relate this telescope to the actual inventor of the telescope, although we don't know which one could be. And actually, we can also improve the dating of the telescope, of this painting, since it is already fall there, and so it cannot be 608, but probably likely the date of this painting should be between 609 and 1610. And that's is finished. There is a fourth painting by Brueghel, which he did in 1621. It is the allegory of the air and the optics, and you see here a flying cherubim observing with the telescope the distant sky, although in daytime seems there are no stars there. But it's very central in the painting. Unfortunately, the detail on this painting is not enough to be helpful to understand if this actually telescope is the same of the other two or not. Anyway, it says that it is rather important because it's central in the painting, right? And that says the end of my talk, and I leave you there the conclusions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paolo. There's time for questions, discussions, remarks. It's very clear. Nobody has questions.
Good. Well, one question that everyone asks me, is possible that someone else draw the telescope, I mean the Bain telescope later on? And that is something, I mean, everyone asks. I think that is difficult, that someone modified such important paintings without that we have a record. And in addition, there are two independent paintings giving more or less the same telescopes in the same year, so it's difficult and with different stories. So they have to be modified both in the same way by the same hand, so it's really, I mean, I think that we can rule out such a possibility. So the paintings are original and made in those years, 1607, and showing that very sophisticated instruments were in the hands of Albert VII a few years after the telescope.
Well, I have not a very clever question, but do you know if Albert VII was blind when he died?
He died? No, I don't know, actually. It could be. Why is so irrelevant?
No, Galileo was blind when he died, right?
Yeah, but it was very...
Yeah. Very much. So
no, I don't think. Well, I don't think that Galileo became blind because he used the telescope very much. No, he was very old. He was very old. Galileo was very clever. When he was observing the sunspots, he was awaiting the clouds. He was observing the sun only before the sunset. And then Benedetto Castelli came already in the 1612, if I'm not wrong, invented the way to project the images. And so then Galileo used this the way invented by his student Francesco Castelli, and so he was not real inventor with his eyes. I mean, it's not because of that, I think. You know, with the disease, you never know from where it comes from.
So thank you very much.
Thank you to you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. Muchas gracias.